right, everyone, welcome back, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling quite the journey, the life of Santiago Matias, or as most know him, Alafolk.
Absolutely. This is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a story that kind of grabs you from the get-go, right? From the streets of El Capotillo to media mogul,
It's incredible.
It really is. But, before we get too far, and I was doing some reading, I was ready to call him self-made, but the more I dug in, it's more nuanced than that, isn't it?
You're right. It's not that simple. Alafolk's drive, his vision, it's undeniable, but you can't separate that from the mentors he met along the way, the community that lifted him up.
Which is a perfect place to start, actually. Let's go back to the beginning. El Capotillo, Santiago's childhood neighborhood. Paint us a picture. For those of us not lucky enough to have been to Santo Domingo, what's the vibe like there?
Okay, close your eyes and imagine this. A place bursting with life, a true melting pot, You've got the rhythm of merengue pouring out from every corner. Bodega, bachata echoing through the streets.
Sounds lively.
Oh, it is. But it's also a place facing real challenges, poverty, hardship, you name it. But here's the thing. That's where the heart of Dominican music beats strongest. That energy, that struggle, it fuels the art.
So it's not just a tough neighborhood, it's like a breeding ground for creativity.
Exactly. And right there, in the thick of it, is a young Alafolk soaking it all up. These streets, they were his first classroom. Resilience, hustle, community. That's what he learned growing up.
And speaking of community, can't forget the women in his life. His mother, his grandmother, his aunt. They played a huge role, didn't they?
Absolutely essential. They were his foundation, always there, instilling a strong work ethic, believing in him, even when his path took some, let's say, unexpected turns.
Because remember, this is a young man who chose music over college, not always an easy sell to a family who sacrificed so much.
Right, a real leap of faith.
It makes you wonder, what was it about music, especially this urban music scene, that spoke to him so deeply?
I think for Alafolk, music, particularly urban music, it was more than just entertainment. It was real, raw, a reflection of the world he saw every day. And the artists he gravitated towards, people like Tego Calderon, Daddy Yankee, they were pioneers, challenging the status quo, giving a voice to a generation that was often ignored.
Hold on, gotta pause you there for a second. When we say urban music, for anyone who's not totally familiar, we're talking more than just rap, right?
You got it. In the Dominican Republic, urban music, it's this whole umbrella. Reggaeton, you've got Latin trap, Dominican Dembow, it's all in the mix. Think music born on the streets, fueled by that youthful energy, breaking free from the traditional stuff.
The soundtrack of a generation finding its voice.
Exactly. And Alafolk, even back then, seemed to get how powerful that voice could be. He's writing lyrics, he's performing, totally immersed in this world that just clicked for him.
And it's right around this time, a chance meeting changes everything.
All right, set the scene for us. This is the Vaquero meeting, right? All right, so picture this. Young, ambitious Alafolk crosses paths with Vaquero, one of the biggest names in Dominican music.
No small fish.
Not at all. Vaquero is known for this electrifying stage presence, this unique sound, blending merengue with hip-hop. And he sees something special in Alafolk.
This isn't just two guys meeting, this is a turning point.
Huge turning point. Vaquero takes him under his wing, brings him on tour as a backup vocalist. Imagine traveling across the Dominican Republic, performing for massive crowds, seeing the ins and outs of the music industry firsthand.
Talk about a masterclass. What did those years on the road teach him?
Everything. This is where Alafolk really starts to understand what connects with audiences, what makes a song stick, how to build a brand. He's not just watching the music, he's studying the business, the marketing, the relationship between artist and fan.
So he's seeing the bigger picture, the machine behind the music.
And he starts to notice a problem. Urban music is blowing up, it's the sound of young Dominican Republic, but the traditional media, they're not paying attention.
Radio silence.
Pretty much. The established radio stations, they're controlled by an older generation. They're slow to catch on.
So you've got this incredible energy, this sound that's speaking to a whole generation, but the people with the microphones, they're not listening.
It's a classic story, right?
Yeah.
The next generation pushing boundaries, the old guard struggling to keep up. But this is where Alafolk's vision, that's where it really shines through. He sees an opportunity not just to support these artists, but to completely shake up the system.
And that's where Alafolk Music comes in, right? 2006, he launches this website. This isn't just some side project. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand.
Completely. And remember, this is 2006. The internet's still kind of figuring itself out. Social media, it's barely a blip on the radar.
Right.
But Alafolk, he gets it. He understands that this is the future. And he builds Alafolk Music to be more than just a website. It's a platform,
Mm.
a place for these artists to get their music heard, connect with fans directly.
He's bypassing the gatekeepers.
Exactly. He's saying, you don't want to listen? Fine, we'll build our own stage.
And it wasn't just the website either, right? It just kept growing from there.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. Alafolk Music, it becomes this multimedia empire. He launches Alafolk FM. Now he's on the airwaves, but on his own terms. Then comes the record label, signing and promoting these up-and-coming artists. He's even organizing live events, bringing that energy, that raw talent, directly to the people.
He's not just riding the wave, he's driving the whole thing forward. And Alafolk music, it becomes synonymous with Dominican urban music. But then, and this is where I was really surprised, he goes from music to, wait for it, beer.
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
It seems like such a left turn. What's the story there?
On the surface, sure, it's a head-scratcher. But if you look closer, this is Alafolk doing what he does best. Spotting an opportunity, an underserved market, and going for it. But with República beer, he's not just entering a market, he's taking on a giant.
Presidente.
Right, President, that's like the Budweiser of the Dominican Republic. Everyone knows it. How do you even begin to compete with that? By tapping into something even more powerful. National pride. Alafolk positions República as the people's beer. It's homegrown, made by Dominicans for Dominicans. He understood that there was this shift happening. People, especially younger generations, they were looking for something authentic, something that resonated with them.
Savvy marketing. But it wasn't just good marketing, was it? I mean, going up against Presidente, that must have come with some pushback.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking distribution roadblocks, pressure on vendors, rumors that Presidente tried to buy him out just to shut him down.
Wow.
It became this whole David versus Goliath battle, played out on a national stage.
And through it all, he perseveres. But I'm wondering, all this hustle, this drive, it can't be easy to maintain. Earlier we talked about his wife, Shirley, how important she is in his life, how they meet. Was it a business connection?
It's funny, even at the age of dating apps and whatnot, sometimes it's just good old-fashioned social media. They met on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was living in the Dominican Republic. They connected over, you guessed it, music, media, that entrepreneurial spirit.
She gets him.
Absolutely. And she brings her own strengths to the table, too. She's the CEO of Alafolk radio show now. She's his confidant, this calming presence in what I imagine is a pretty hectic life.
I can only imagine. A true partnership. But speaking of partnerships, there's another side to Alafolk that we haven't touched on yet. We talk about the success, the empire, but there's this whole other side to Alafolk, this commitment to giving back. It's not something you always see, especially with these larger-than-life figures.
It's true. It can get lost in the shuffle. You see the República beer billboards, the Soberano Awards, but philanthropy, that's always been part of his stories. Like, he sees success as a two-way street. You don't just gain, you give back.
Speaking of the Soberano Awards, just for our listeners who might not be as familiar, what are those exactly?
Oh, they're a big deal. Think like the Grammys, the Oscars, but in the Dominican Republic. They recognize everything, music, TV, film, even online stuff now. And here's the thing, Alafolk, he comes in, shakes up the whole media landscape, and they embrace him. He's won multiple Soberanos, YouTuber of the Year, all that.
Shows how things change, right? The establishment recognizing this whole new wave of creators.
For sure.
But back to the giving back part, it's not just writing checks for Alafolk, is it?
No, not at all. He's really hands-on. Like the Alafolk Education Foundation, he does scholarships, which is great, but he also focuses on mentorship, making connections for these students. It's about giving them a real shot, not just a handout.
Yeah, it's that whole teach a man to fish idea.
Exactly.
And it makes me think of Maria Ramirez, that story we talked about. She gets that scholarship from Alafolk's foundation, studies environmental science, and now she's out there, an advocate, fighting for her community.
And that's the thing. That's what he's trying to do. Create a ripple effect. It's not just about individual success stories. It's about systemic change, like with the Alafolk Youth Empowerment Program, giving young people in these underserved communities the tools to navigate a system that often feels rigged against them.
Mentorship, leadership, resources, that's huge. And it's not just limited to youth either, right?
Sure.
He's also a big advocate for women, especially in fields like music and media where, let's face it, it's still a boys' club in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. The Alafolk Women's Empowerment Program, it's all about providing opportunities for women, entrepreneurs, professionals, training, mentorship, networking. He's creating pathways where there weren't any before.
For someone so driven, ambitious, and you can definitely say Alacoque is those things, he's also been really open about his struggles, the anxiety, even facing burnout. That's not something you see every day, especially from someone who projects this image of, always being on, always hustling.
It's refreshing, actually. That vulnerability, it makes him relatable, you know? And it also helps to destigmatize mental health, especially within the Latino community, where those conversations aren't always easy to have.
Right, it makes it okay to not be okay all the time.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder if those struggles, that vulnerability, maybe that's part of what drives his philanthropy, his desire to help others.
I think that's a real possibility. He's talked about the importance of balance, of expanding his own definition of success. It's not just about money, it's about well-being, it's about making a difference.
Which brings us back to this idea of Alafolk constantly evolving what success looks like. It starts with music, then it's business, then social change, mental health. Now he's even gotten into sports.
Yeah.
He founded a team in the King League called Los Galácticos del Caribe.
Always pushing boundaries, always exploring. But through it all, there's that common thread, right? Representation, giving a voice to the voiceless, building something bigger than himself.
So as we wrap up here, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What's the Santiago Matias, the Alafolk legacy? What can we learn from this guy?
I think Alafolk challenges us to rethink our own definitions of success. It's a good reminder that ambition and compassion, they're not mutually exclusive.
You can be driven and still care.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing the power we all have in our own way to create positive change.
It doesn't have to be some grand gesture either, right?
Not at all. Even small actions can have a big impact.
I like that. So on that note, we'll leave you with this. What's one thing you can do today, big or small, to embody that spirit? And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.